What if I told you that what most men crave in sex has nothing to do with wild positions, flawless bodies, or marathon sessions? What if the real secret to unforgettable intimacy isn't about how you do it, but how you make him feel? Because the truth is, great sex for a man starts long before the bedroom, and it has everything to do with one powerful emotion most people overlook. When people talk about great sex, they often focus on physicality. But what most people miss, especially when it comes to understanding men, is that the emotional experience shapes the physical one more than we realize. For a man to truly feel like the sex he's having is great, not just good, not just exciting, but deeply fulfilling, he has to feel emotionally connected to the person he's with. It's easy to assume men are wired to enjoy sex without needing much depth or connection, but that's a lazy stereotype. The truth is, men crave emotional security just as much as women do, especially in a space as vulnerable as intimacy. When a man feels emotionally connected to his partner, when he feels like he's truly seen and accepted, sex becomes more than just a release. It becomes a moment of validation, closeness, and belonging. For many men, emotional connection unlocks a different level of physical enjoyment. It allows them to relax, to stop performing, to stop worrying about being impressive or masculine or perfect. They can be themselves, they can be silly, they can be tender, they can be present. That's when sex becomes memorable, not because of how long it lasted or how acrobatic it was, but because of how real it felt. In that space, a man doesn't feel like he's trying to prove anything. He feels like he's part of something. He's not just giving pleasure or receiving it, he's sharing it. And that's a subtle but powerful difference. When a man feels emotionally safe, the walls come down, he can explore, he can ask, he can respond. There's a freedom in that kind of connection. A freedom to let go, a freedom to be expressive, and with that freedom comes passion. Because passion doesn't thrive in a space of anxiety or detachment. It thrives where people are open, unguarded, and honest with each other. A man may not always have the words to describe this, and often he won't even realize it consciously, but he feels it. He feels when something's missing. He feels when sex is mechanical, transactional, or emotionally distant. And he also feels when sex carries emotional weight, when it's filled with trust, curiosity, and shared vulnerability. Emotional connection makes a man feel safe enough to desire fully, to give fully, and to receive without second guessing. It takes him out of his head and puts him into the moment. And in that moment, he's not worried about whether he's doing it right. He's present, immersed, and responsive. That's what most men really want, but don't always know how to say. It's not just about being turned on, it's about being turned towards someone who turns toward you with the same energy. That's when chemistry becomes connection. That's when desire becomes intimacy. And that's when sex stops being just sex and becomes something that lasts in your memory. Not because it was wild, but because it was real. The kind of sex that stays with a man isn't always the most dramatic or intense. It's the kind that made him feel accepted, the kind that made him feel like he could be himself, the kind that made him feel like more of who he already is, not less, because men are just as emotionally wired as anyone else. They're just taught not to say it out loud. But in the quiet of those moments, when he feels close to you, safe with you, and wanted by you, that's when it becomes great. That's when it becomes unforgettable. There's a massive misconception about what men care about during sex. The world tells them that performance is everything. That if they don't last long enough, do it well enough, or impress their partner with the right moves, they've somehow failed. This pressure sits on their shoulders constantly, and it steals the joy out of something that's meant to be natural and connective. The truth is, most men aren't looking to be judged on their performance. They're looking for permission to just be themselves. What matters more to them than a flawless routine is a moment that feels mutual, honest, and emotionally alive. When a man is with someone who communicates clearly, responds genuinely, and brings their real self into the space, it gives him room to breathe. And that room is where confidence is born. Confidence in sex doesn't come from mastering every technique. It comes from feeling safe to be imperfect, from knowing that he doesn't need to be a mind reader, from knowing that if something doesn't go perfectly, it doesn't mean the moment is ruined. It means they're human. What a man wants is to be with someone who creates that kind of space, where laughter can happen, where exploration is welcomed, and where the pressure to perform fades into a shared experience of discovery. That kind of connection can't be faked. It comes from communication that is open and kind, not passive-aggressive or silently judgmental. And when that happens, sex becomes less about meeting a bar and more about building something meaningful together. Most men are deeply affected by how their partner makes them feel emotionally during intimacy. If they feel criticized, unappreciated, or ignored, it shows up in how present they are. But if they feel desired, accepted, and acknowledged, it brings out their best side. That's why communication isn't just about words, it's about energy. It's in how you respond to touch. It's in the sounds, the eye contact, the small affirmations that say, "I'm here with you, and I'm enjoying this too." That reassurance is fuel. It's what allows a man to get out of his own head and truly drop into the experience. Without that, he's stuck managing anxiety. And when a man is anxious, sex becomes a task. He starts thinking instead of feeling, planning instead of connecting. And once that starts, everything becomes harder, not physically, but emotionally. When a partner is open and expressive, it lifts that weight. It tells him that he doesn't need to constantly ask himself if he's doing it right. It tells him he's doing just fine. And in that space, he gets to be real. He gets to stop performing and start participating. The experience turns into something collaborative rather than competitive. And that shift changes everything. Because now, he's not trying to impress someone, he's sharing something with them. He's tuned in, he's receptive, he's energized by the feedback he's getting. And that creates a kind of loop, a rhythm between two people where confidence feeds off connection and connection feeds off presence. It's subtle, but it's powerful. The best sex a man can have is the kind where he doesn't have to wonder if he's enough, where he's not worried about how he stacks up to someone else's past, where he doesn't feel like he's being evaluated. What matters to him most is whether he feels like his partner actually wants to be there with him, not because of how well he performs, but because of who he is. When a man is seen that way, without pressure or performance, he relaxes. And when he relaxes, he becomes fully available, not just physically, but emotionally. And that's the foundation for real intimacy. Not just good sex, great sex. There's something powerful that happens when a man feels truly wanted, not just tolerated, not just physically accepted, but wanted. In the way someone looks at him, the way they touch him, the way they initiate, engage, and respond to him. Most men walk around with an invisible question hanging over their heads: am I enough? They may not say it, they may not show it, but deep down, that question drives a lot of their behavior. And when a partner communicates without even needing to use words that they genuinely want him, not just the act, but him, it does something to him. It calms his nervous system. It wakes up his desire. It makes him feel significant. It makes him feel chosen. For many men, the idea of being desired is not something they experience often. Society expects them to be the pursuers, to always initiate, to always prove themselves first. But that chase becomes exhausting when it never flips, when he never gets to feel like he's being pursued, like someone is excited by his presence, hungry for his touch, responsive to his energy. When a man finally feels that, it lights him up from the inside out. It shifts the dynamic from obligation to connection, because what he really craves isn't just physical access, it's emotional affirmation. He wants to feel like he's turning his partner on, that his body, his voice, his presence, it does something for them. That's not ego, that's intimacy. It's a reminder that he matters, not just as a performer, but as a person. The difference between being tolerated and being desired is night and day. When a man feels tolerated, he holds back, he second guesses, he starts watching for signs that he's doing something wrong. He gets quiet, careful, strategic. But when he feels wanted, he opens up, he leans in, he becomes more confident, more generous, more willing to explore. That sense of being wanted makes everything more electric. The eye contact lasts longer, the touch feels more meaningful, the energy becomes charged, not because the act itself is different, but because the feeling behind it is different. Now, he's not asking, "Do you want me?" He knows the answer. This doesn't mean a man needs to be constantly praised or endlessly complimented. It means he wants to feel like his presence affects his partner, like he matters in that moment, like he's not just filling a role but inspiring something real. Even small signals can give that feeling. The way someone undresses him slowly instead of rushing, the way they kiss him like they've been waiting for it all day, the way they initiate, reach for him, or let their voice express pleasure without hesitation. Those are the moments that tell a man he's desired, and those moments stick with him. They become anchors for his memory, not because of how wild or perfect everything was, but because he felt important. There's something deeply validating about being wanted, and men are no different than anyone else in that way. In fact, many men rarely experience that feeling openly. They're expected to chase, impress, perform. But when the roles reverse, even just a little, when someone shows him that they want him, it changes how he sees himself. It pulls him deeper into the experience. It creates a kind of feedback loop where his desire grows because he feels desire. That loop is magnetic. It builds trust. It builds excitement. It makes sex feel less like a routine and more like a personal celebration. The best experiences don't come from perfection. They come from energy. And the most powerful energy of all is knowing that someone truly wants you. Not just what you're doing, but you. That's the heartbeat of great sex for a man. There's a subtle shift that happens when someone goes from thinking about what they should be doing during sex to simply being present in the moment. And for men, that shift is everything. So much pressure gets placed on performance, technique, duration, and intensity. It turns intimacy into a checklist. But what makes sex unforgettable isn't how many moves someone knows, it's how deeply they're paying attention. A man doesn't want a partner who's perfect in technique but disconnected in presence. He wants to feel like what's happening is real, spontaneous, and alive. That only happens when both people are tuned in to each other and not stuck in their own heads trying to impress or perform. Being present means reading each other's body language. It means noticing the smallest reactions, a breath, a pause, a shift in tone, and responding to them with care and curiosity. That level of attentiveness isn't something you can fake. It only happens when you're genuinely engaged. And that's where great sex begins for a man, because he doesn't want to feel like he's in a scene. He wants to feel like he's in a moment that belongs only to the two of you. When his partner is present, he feels seen. He feels like Nothing else matters in that space but what's happening right there between two real people who are fully connected. That creates a kind of emotional feedback that technique alone can never achieve. There's a myth that being good in bed is about knowing all the right tricks, but no trick, no matter how flashy or advanced, can replace the feeling of someone being fully there with you. Presence creates trust. It allows both people to relax into the experience. It makes space for laughter, for softness, for improvisation. And that kind of freedom is what most men don't even know they're missing. When a man is with someone who's in the moment with him, who's not worried about looking a certain way or doing everything right, he feels that energy. It draws him in. It makes him want to give more, try more, and express more. The irony is that most of the things people think they need to do to make sex amazing are completely unnecessary if they just allow themselves to be emotionally and physically available. Because once two people are fully present, they find their rhythm naturally. They listen with their bodies, they speak without words. It becomes a silent dance that doesn't follow a script. For a man, that experience is far more meaningful than any technique he's ever read about. He remembers how you made him feel, not how acrobatic things got. And presence is the one ingredient that always makes him feel like what you shared wasn't just physical, it was personal. Most men want to feel like they're not alone in the experience, that they're not just doing something to someone, but with someone. Presence is what makes that possible. It's not about being perfect or performing. It's about surrendering to the connection, letting go of the need to impress, and allowing the moment to unfold naturally. That's when intimacy becomes magnetic, when everything else fades away, and when the person he's with feels fully there, with no distractions, no performance, and no emotional distance. It gives him permission to be just as present. That shared awareness is what makes sex unforgettable, not because it followed any formula, but because it was real. What happens between two people when they're alone is always shaped by what's happening when they're not. For a man, sex doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's deeply influenced by how he feels about the relationship, how emotionally connected he feels during the day, and how secure he feels in the dynamic. You can't disconnect physical intimacy from emotional context. If a man feels dismissed, disrespected, or emotionally distant outside the bedroom, it becomes almost impossible for him to show up fully inside it. He might go through the motions, but there's a layer of him that's shut down, guarded, or disconnected. And that subtle gap between physical closeness and emotional distance is what turns sex into an empty act rather than an expression of connection. The moments when you speak kindly to him, show appreciation, or simply acknowledge his efforts aren't just good relationship habits, they're foundational to how he shows up intimately. When a man feels respected by his partner, when he feels like his thoughts matter, his intentions are seen, and his presence is valued, he relaxes. That relaxation opens the door to intimacy. He stops worrying about proving himself and starts focusing on sharing himself. That space of emotional ease makes physical connection more fluid, more confident, and more real. Men may not always verbalize this, but it's wired into how they experience closeness. When the emotional temperature is warm, he's more likely to be fully present, more expressive, and more generous in giving and receiving love. On the flip side, when there's tension, criticism, or emotional coldness throughout the day, it doesn't just disappear when the lights go off. It lingers. It creates hesitation. It makes a man unsure of his role in the relationship or question whether he's still admired and wanted. That insecurity shows up in small ways. Less enthusiasm, less vulnerability, or even a sense of emotional retreat. Men often aren't taught to process or express these feelings directly, so they show up through behavior, through silence, through detachment, through lack of initiative. And while it may look like indifference, it's often just a response to not feeling emotionally safe. This is why small gestures outside the bedroom carry so much weight. A genuine compliment, a touch on the arm, a thank you, a check-in during the day, all of it builds emotional capital. And that capital becomes intimacy. Because to a man, great sex is about being with someone who doesn't just want his body, but appreciates his heart, his mind, and his effort. When he feels admired and emotionally connected, he becomes more open to sharing himself fully. That's when intimacy stops being a performance and starts becoming an experience, one that feels complete, not just because of physical chemistry, but because of emotional alignment. And that alignment is built in the small, everyday moments long before either person gets undressed. Great sex for a man is rarely just about the physical. It's about how he feels in your presence, how emotionally connected he is, and whether he feels truly seen, wanted, and safe. When he senses emotional depth, when he's freed from pressure to perform, when your energy tells him that you desire him, not just the act, he steps into the moment fully. It's not technique that makes him remember the experience, it's the feeling of being chosen, appreciated, and understood. The most unforgettable intimacy doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts with emotional safety, mutual presence, and a shared vulnerability that says, I'm here with you, and I want you. When a man feels that, he doesn't just enjoy the moment, he cherishes it. Because it's rare, it's real, and it touches more than just his body. It reaches his heart.